Omar, what's up, man?
Hey, man. Good to see you.
Likewise, man.
Of course.
So, real quick, could we do a quick intro?
Of course, my name is Omar Z. Robles. I am a photographer based here in New York City, originally from Puerto Rico. I'm here in the corner of 7th Avenue and 34th Street, yes. This is one of the corners that I frequent a lot. It's a great, beautiful day today. The light is amazing. Today I'm working with the Leica Q343. It's been a workhorse for me since I got it. I used to use the Leica Q328. Before that, the Q2. And I also work with the M bodies, but since I got this one, I was very surprised. I didn't know what to expect from this focal distance, but I was very curious, and I've been very surprised by the versatility of this camera, and particularly of the lens. You know, allows you to be, flexible enough between like pure street photography and then also a little bit of you look beautiful, and a little bit of like portraiture. So that for me, it's like quite fun.
Have you dealt with any negative reactions while doing street photography?
I have. It happens way less than you would expect. I feel a lot of it comes from like, obviously people have their own prejudice, right? How they feel about other people photographing them. But for the most part, I think it's a lot about what energy you put into it. And I come to this with a lot of curiosity, passion, integrity. And I think that comes through when people see you. And worst case scenario, for the most part, I will just, do a little bit of a smile. And usually that kind of diffuses a lot of like whatever people's reaction might be, because when you smile, this might sound corny, but then it really gives off like a friendly vibe, right? Like you're saying, like in a way, without words, you're just saying, hey, I come in peace, And for the most part, that takes care of the situation. There's been other times where people ask questions, and then I'm happy to have a conversation with a person, and then it's an interesting interaction. At the end of the day, my take is that I don't want anyone that I interact with or that I photograph to come out of the experience with a negative experience, being angry or mad. So I try to just like lead the conversation and like answer their questions if I have to, and obviously try to de-escalate it as much as I can. Kind of passionate about photographing people having like PDAs, public displays of affection, and I have several series that I've worked on that subject, like here in New York and around the world. What I like to photograph in the street oftentimes is more, I try to go more for action, like concrete actions and moments that are very descriptive on their own. They carry already a story. But then I also like to do like details, like I go for little things that, photograph, things that people carry in their hands, like money, and then also like things that people wear on themselves, hats. I've always been passionate about hats, and I have like a hat collection. Look at this guy. What's going on, man? Good to see you.
Good, how about you?
Yeah, likewise, man, all good. So that's like another cool thing. It's like a lot of the friendships that I've made in New York City have been like people that like this that I meet on the streets. And then it's like, hey, what you doing? All right, let's go have a beer after this. And then we come, we can keep, I don't know, I also believe a lot in community, like you can go out and photograph by yourself, but there's a strength, there's a strength in community that I find that I think, it's a little bit of like safety in numbers, but also, I don't know. Like I said, I'm a people watcher. I like people. I have a love-hate relationship with people in general.
What does it mean to you to be a Puerto Rican artist in New York City?
Well, it's interesting because a lot of people say that Puerto Rico is the fifth borough of New York. Is that what they say? So in many ways, there's I feel very much at home here in New York City. Have I encountered moments of like prejudice or racism? Yes. Like in New York, it's a melting pot. So I don't think, it's just part of the experience, sadly. But other than that, it's like, yeah, you see a lot of like people from your own community here. So
the mime training in Paris and the dance book. Tell us about it. What brought that on, and what were you trying to explore?
So as I started doing street photography back in 2010 or so, I was still I think at that time I was almost like in my last leg, let's say, of like days of performing, as you know, in theater. And one of the things that I started to wanted to create back then was like a contrast between what I was seeing in the street, and creating something a little bit more theatrical. So I actually started putting myself in the frames. I would bring like a tripod, and I would put myself in the frame and create like stylized jumps and poses that kind of like broke the monotony of what I was seeing in the everyday life in New York City. That series evolved into me starting to work with dancers because it was hard to be in front of the camera and behind the camera, and in little by little the series took a life of its own. And because I have that background in performance and dance and mime, then I can really direct the dancers from a very different point of view that is not just about do something and I'll photograph it, but I know exactly what I want to see in this particular location. And I also, most importantly, know how to like really shape the dancer's body to what I want to see. So that means that I'm directing and saying, okay, do this, but then I go like, all right, let's try it with more extension, let's turn out a little bit more, and I really talk to them in a language that they understand that is very specific to dance. The book specifically is called In the Light of Day We Dance. As I started to discover the world of dance, I realized that there's obviously a lot of inequity, like racial and ethnical, for lack of a better word, inequity. So as a Latino man, I wanted to start highlighting, Latino artists in the dance world. And then I extended the scope of the book to also extend it to like black and brown dancers. So the book itself, it's about highlighting black and brown dancers from different companies all around the world. And yeah, it was a passion project. I did it in collaboration with Adobe Lightroom. I was an ambassador, and I am an ambassador for Adobe Lightroom. And back when I was working directly with them, they gave me a grant, and I was able to create that book. And I'm super excited that I was able to create something that really mattered to me beyond just the subject of dance, but also the subject of representation.
Do you recall your first photograph that kind of hooked you in? I see you smiling.
Because you think about it, right? And it kind of came to mind. First, again, I always make that distinction about taking versus making. I guess back then I was more like maybe taking because I was doing experiments. But I remember the first photo that I didn't know what street photography was back then. I was learning photography, and actually, I guess ignorance is bliss. So back then, it was one time that I was living in Chicago. I came to New York to visit my brother who was living here. And I always had my camera out, so I started photographing what I saw, and I wasn't thinking about the people or anything like that, so I was not scared about what I was photographing. And I remember photographing this photo, creating this photo of like a guy that was wearing like a Cookie Monster like costume, but then he was also kind of big, and when he took off the mask, he was also very funny looking. And he was kind of like giggling, and I know the photo came out blurry, and I thought it was like the most amazing photo at that moment. But that told me something. It's like, yeah, there's something about like photographing characters that I found fascinating. And then I think, like, again, I wasn't even thinking about street photography. I loved that photo, and then when I went back to Chicago, little by little, I started learning more about street photography, and funnily enough, when I learned about it and decided to go for it, I started to get very afraid of it. And I think, again, ignorance is bliss. So oftentimes you don't know what you don't know what you don't know, they say. And when you don't know what you're doing exactly, you don't care. But when you start like learning more about it, then you become more self-conscious about it. But again, it took me some time to like really soak in what street photography was as an art form and the legality of it and all that stuff. And then it started coming out with more confidence. But for me, it was a way to push myself to do the thing that I was afraid of. Because again, like I was also doing photojournalism, and I didn't mention this before. And if I had to photograph people for an assignment, I had no fear because, well, I had fear because I had fear of like confrontation or like, getting their job done right, but I had to do it because otherwise I wasn't going to get paid. So when I started like discovering street photography and like caring about it, but feeling afraid of it, I was like, no, this, I don't like being afraid of anything. So I'm gonna push myself to do this every day until I feel comfortable. And now, like I can't get enough of it. Because that's the beautiful thing about what we're doing, What we're really photographing is the patterns of life. So there is a big likelihood that, you saw something, maybe you missed it, and there's a big likelihood that it's gonna happen again. Maybe not that same day, but another day you're gonna see something similar. And in a way, thank you. In a way, that's also how I end up developing series, because I also love this concept of series. There's one thing when you photograph a moment, but then when you photograph that moment over and over and over again, it becomes its own language and its own study of that particular thing or action or whatever. And again, like I said, these are patterns that we see in the streets. So nothing happens in a void. Everything is kind of like a cycle in that sense. That's also what's interesting about approaching the work that way, because oftentimes then it's almost like I'm trying to one-up myself into like, okay, I created a photo, for example, of my series of hats that I have going on right now. And then it's like, all right, I know I'm gonna see more of them, so I just wanna keep one-upping myself. And the next one, and oftentimes it doesn't even start as a series. It starts as me trying to like make the best photo in that sense, and then it just keeps happening. Like I keep trying for it. Ooh. Ooh. Can you make a living as a street photographer? I have been doing it for as a photographer in general for quite a while. Back in the height of like the Instagram kind of influencer era, for like, I hustled my way into, I ended up working with brands and becoming a brand ambassador for like several photography brands, Adobe included, and now most recently also Leica as well. So, that's a way to make a living. Other photographers do a lot of like, other street photographers do a lot of like workshops. And I have done workshops. It's a good way of making a living as a photographer. Personally, I don't want to go through that route just like full time yet, because I feel I still have a lot to learn before I have something to give, Like I can give a lot right now. I can do, a workshop, a masterclass and all that stuff. But I feel like I want to leave that to the point in my career where maybe I can't go out to the streets that much anymore, and then the way I kind of end up living, vicariously through the students in a certain way, if that makes any sense. But you find your way, like I discovered the NFT space, and I started selling my work as NFTs. Interestingly enough,
How did that work?
so it's to try to like summarize it as fast as I can. It's no different than selling your work as prints, but you're selling them digitally, where they're stored in the blockchain, and the NFT itself is basically serves as the certificate of authenticity. It gives the image provenance, and it also creates a ledger. So whenever the image is like sold or traded, it's also like saved in the ledger. So it also, like I find that very interesting in the terms of like the ledger, right? Like for example, one of my photos, it was a dance photo. It was recently collected by a bank in Switzerland. So now it's always going to say that photo belonged to that bank at some point. If they trade it, if they resell it, then it's always going to carry that. And when you go and see the photo on the blockchain, you'll see that information. So I find that fascinating, because it adds again a layer of provenance and history to the images. So yeah, I started selling my work through that avenue of NFTs. Interestingly enough, the dance work did okay, but what people ended up liking more was the street photography, and I did several series. The first one was called the PDA's NYC, and it was the one about, like people sharing private moments of affection in the streets, publicly, I guess. And then the other one that I did afterward was called City, and it was, it was a series of 25 photographs of different street photography moments that were very narrative and full of expression. And yeah, and that was like a very successful body of work. At the end of the day, it's just about finding what avenue you can to monetize your work and hustle. Hustle like a mother, for lack of a better word. You have to go out every day and make connections, talk to people. What's a day in my life look like? I'm a creature of habit, very much, so I have routines. Initially, I get onto my computer and I start working, whether it is editing or just spending time on social media, on Twitter, promoting my work, connecting with collectors, connecting with the different communities that I work with. And usually then I will have like lunch, and then I go out after lunch. There's been times that I go out in the morning and then I come back home, and then I go out, photographing in the morning, then I come back home, have lunch, and then go back out in the afternoon. I do that mostly during the summer because the days are longer. The last 5 years of my life have been crazy. I've had to deal with a lot of personal stuff. We all went through the pandemic, and never have I stopped working. And I just realized that the other day. I was like, wow, like all of this stuff has happened in my life the past 5 years or so. And in my mind, there was never like, oh, I need to take a break. It was the opposite. And it's not like a workaholic thing. It's that I love what I do so much that is what drives me.
What are your thoughts on street photography and privacy?
There's no privacy. You're out in the world. You're not being private. You're being very public. So if as a person you care so much about privacy, then stay at home. We live in a society that we're being like photographed and recorded at every single angle, whether it is by security cameras or every other influencer that's out making like a video and carrying a camera, and somehow you always end up in the background. So the concept of privacy, at least in the public space, it's a little bit of a fallacy, in many ways. So I think at the end of the day, everyone, especially every photographer in that case, has their own, set of ethics. So if you feel uncomfortable with doing it, don't do it, and that's fine, that's you. But from a moral point of view, I'm not doing anything wrong. Same thing if I see it and then I paint it, or I write a story about it. It's no different because this is art. And art is about expression, and art always, 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 in one way or another, will draw from your personal experience. So that's the way I see it.
What do you make of social media and modern photography? I have this love-hate relationship with it. What are your thoughts on it?
I mean, you could say that it's a necessary evil. I mean, again, it's one of those things that have done a lot of good, but also a lot of harm. When I started on Instagram, to give you an example, my brother, who's also like a photographer, he's mostly a writer, but he also, I took on photography after him, realistically. And back in the day, he was giving me grief for being on Instagram and for putting my work on Instagram. But one, I was honestly learning, but two, I was like, there's no one knocking at my door asking me to sell the photos right now, on a gallery. So I'm gonna do what I need to do, or the tools that I have at my disposal right now to get my work out there. And turns out I wasn't that wrong, right? I was able to build a community and to get my work out there and get recognition for my work because people identify with it, right? People identify with it.
What do you make of the future of photography in the light of, AI?
Well, I think the future of photography is no different than its present, right? I think, if anything, people will hopefully get an appreciation for what's created in a more manual or traditional way versus something that was like, because that's the thing with AI also. It's like, it's so easy, you know. And mind you, people would say that photography was easy compared to like painting and all that stuff. So yeah, I get it, but I think people will get an appreciation for like the craft of photography itself that will always be there. As far as technology goes, that's the bigger question, right? Because where I would like it to go, for example, is I would like obviously better autofocus. We kind of have that already, but better. Better low light performance is something more than like pixels. I strive for more like better low light performance, like being able to photograph at night and like in, you know, or indoors without having to worry that much about the grain and all that stuff. We're kind of getting there, but we're still not there. Like, so more flexibility and more freedom in that sense.
Debate between film and digital.
I don't think there should be a debate. I think, you know, some people like it, some people don't. I think it's kind of silly to say that one is better than the other one. That is very silly, and like, again, I think people just keep repeating like marketing jargon in general to, it's like, oh, it slows you down. No, you can't slow down with anything. Like, it's the slowing down, it's you. It's in your head. It's not like the gear. You know, if the gear is making you slow down, you're doing something wrong. The gear shouldn't be the thing that slows you down. So, you know, I don't think one is better than the other one. I think if one satisfies you more than the other one, then that's a you thing. But you cannot make a generalization that film is, you know, like real photography and digital isn't. So I think in that aspect, yes. But again, going back to what I was saying before, is that from a technological point of view, we can see that there's not a whole lot more to add, and at least into the technological side of being able to create a photograph. Yes, autofocus and all those things, yeah. But other than that, it's the same thing, you know. So as far as the future goes, well, I hope it's still around in a few years, because I need to keep making a salary.
So Omar, what do you have coming up, and how can people find you and your work?
As far as like where people can find me, I'm on all the platforms as @Omar Z Robles. So Instagram, Twitter, mostly that. I mean YouTube as well. I'm on other platforms as well, but I think, you know, like Blue Sky, no one uses that anymore. Threads is what it is. So yeah, I mean those are the places you can find me. So yeah, that's what's going on in my life right now. Thank you so much.
All right, Omar, that's gonna wrap it up for us today. Appreciate you, brother.
Hey man, take
Thank
care.
you so much.
Bye.